It's me, Nim Sony. Welcome back to my review of Half-Life Alyx. Now, I've split this video up into two parts. This is part two. If you haven't watched part one, please go ahead and have a look at that. And it's quite important because it does lead up to this one and it kind of will allow you to decide whether you want to watch this video or not. This video is going to be a little bit longer. Now, let me just start by saying that this is my own opinion of the game. This is what I feel when I played it. And it's not gonna be pretty. I'm afraid it's unfortunate that I have to tell the truth of how I felt playing this game. There are three major elements in my opinion of the game. There's the story and environmental part, mainly what I discussed in the first video. Even though it's a very short review, this overall is not a completely comprehensive review anyway. There's obviously the story and environmental stuff, and then there's puzzles, and then there's combat. That's the way I see this game. That's what it's kind of split up into. The themes, obviously, there's like horror and other stuff, other themes. It's very much Half-Life in the way that it handles its themes, but this is the kind of elements that I split it up to. In terms of story, it's still quite cool, you know, it's fun. It feels like Half-Life by the end of it. The environment is all still visually impressive, and that leads to good VR. That's the good bit. That's the bit that is realistic and makes you feel like you're really there. But this kind of leads to the puzzles. Now, puzzles, they can be environmental, they can have physics, and then of course you can get those the hacking puzzle that you kind of get in the game. Let's start with the physics because there's barely any of them in my opinion. I feel like the only thing I even remember there being in terms of physics puzzles is when you move a box right at the start of the game, when the game teaches you how to use physics to climb up on things. You move a box, you stand on top of it, you climb through the window. The box is right next to the window already anyway, so you only have to move it a few meters. And that's about it. I don't really remember ever moving another object to climb on top of it in the rest of the game. And I finished the game a few days ago, after 28 hours, so I really focused on the game and how it looks and how all of the little mechanics would work together. Excuse me for my little hiccup there. So not much on the physics side. I think it's very weak puzzles on the physics side. Environmentally though, they're pretty good. You know, it's quite okay. You've got quite a few different things throughout each chapter. You know, every chapter feels like a different element is at play, and that leads to the environmental puzzles. Unfortunately, whenever you try and use the physics for these puzzles, or like find a little way around it, you realize very quickly that a game has a very linear pathway and you're not really allowed to do anything other than that. So the physics actually highlights how linear the game is. You don't want to even move physics objects around and try and climb on them because you're only going to likely break the game or just be told that, you know, this is not how you complete the puzzle. Other things like keys and stuff, obviously, you know, you try and follow the path and you have to pick up an item that'll be used on a door or something like that. Let me just give you a breakdown of how these regularly work. You grab a key, you find the door for it, or you already found the door and then you unlock the door and that's it, you've used the key. In a game like Mario 64, let's go back in time. You know, you go beat up Bowser and you get a key, and then the game is able to store that you've got that key. There's nothing physical that you have to store. You don't have to hold that key in the character's hand. You can just carry on playing the game. Here it's all physical. Here it has to exist and you can holster it if you want to. Unfortunately, this shows how the very limits of the holster system really limits their design and whatever they can do with keys and stuff like that. You can drop these things and you can lose them, which means that they have to really limit how much they even use these kinds of things at all in the game. Not to mention that your holster can only store 2 items at a time that isn't ammo, which means that you have a choice between holding the key in your holster and then holding one other item. A key takes half your entire inventory in terms of small items. So again, they have to very much limit where you're going to be using these and what they can do with them. You can't really travel with them. It has to be a door really close by that you actually use them for. The only other type of puzzle really is the hacking puzzles. Now these start off pretty good and they feel quite fun, but you kind of realize they're quite repetitive pretty quickly. There's not very many of them. There's maybe 4 or 5 or maybe 6, I don't know. And they feel a little bit like an old puzzle box that I had. My friend once gave me a puzzle box as a little gift on my birthday, it's like a part of a gift, and they really know that I like doing these things. Whenever you're sitting bored and you've got like an hour that you want to just kill, you pick up the puzzle box and you start doing a little puzzle, and it's so complicated and annoying. It's got a simple premise, but it takes you a whole half hour to even figure out how to get a ring through a rope or something like that. That's what these puzzles feel like. Except the problem is, I'm halfway through a storyline and I'm trying to get into a cabinet to get a health vial in a first-person shooter. I don't want to have to sit there for 5 minutes trying to figure out an annoyingly and unnecessarily difficult puzzle, which is not even that difficult, it's just complex. It's just more complex than the earlier version of it. It just gets more complex over time and wastes time. You feel like I don't want to do this. I just want to avoid the puzzle. Just let me open the damn machine. You've already had to go through the environmental puzzle to power up the machine, and now you're being forced to do a really boring, repetitive puzzle that you've done 500 times already. And that's kind of where the puzzles end. The game doesn't really do much beyond that. The environmental puzzles feel really good, but there's not much. They're very limited because of VR. It's sort of limited by your movement, limited by the way they don't want to really use physics at all. This leads me on to the third element, which is combat. Combat really takes a dip here. I feel like combat is quite weak in this game, and VR does combat really well. That's the one thing that feels good in VR. Here you've got quite a few enemy types, and it's not too bad on that side, except the main archetype is just head crabs. Head crabs, head crabs, head crabs. This is something you'll realize pretty quick, and it sticks. I thought it was like just the early parts of the game, but no, this game just puts head crabs in your way all the time. It's just head crabs. I mean, I'm going to try not to be too spoilery here, but I'm going to pretty much describe every single enemy in the game. You've got the regular head crabs. You've got armored head crabs. You've got zombies that drop head crabs. You've got zombies that drop armored head crabs. And then you've got combine that drop head crabs, because they've got head crabs on the combine. And then you've got spider type head crabs. Plenty of head crab types, yeah? And these guys turn up everywhere. Like literally every... I think there's only 2 combine that have head crabs on them, but I don't remember like much beyond that. You've got this new special electric guy. I'm not going to give you his name, but I don't know whether he was in other games. I was never like a big time Half-Life 2 fan or anything like that. The game was good, you know, it was really freaking good, but that's about it, you know. I'm not the kind of fanboy type, which I'm sure you can tell by this video. Next up, you've got Antlions, which are cool. You know, they look scary, but they're really weak. They have this sort of marching animation to them, and it's like dum 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 dum. If you added like a funny music to them, it would seem so funny. Like, they're so weak. You shoot one leg, you shoot the other leg, you shoot them in the giant glowing back, and boom, they're dead. They take 3 shots. They take less shots than most enemies. They're as weak as a head crab. The special antlions are even weaker. You can shoot them in the back straight away. 1-shot kill if you're good. Then you've got the combine, the guys you really want to play with. Unfortunately, these guys are OP. There's only 3 of them, really, that I think... Well, I think maybe there's 4, I don't know. There's the combine soldier, the regular guy. You've got the armored guy who's got a shotgun. And then you've got the armored guy who has a minigun. 2 of them, well, pretty much all 3 of them show up in this video today. These guys take headshots. Just constant headshots. Now you're probably mentioning as well, hey, wait a minute, Nimso, there's also barnacles and stuff like that, right? Yeah, those guys are there, but they're not enemies, they're just hazards. They're like the spikes in Sonic the Hedgehog. You wouldn't call spikes enemies, but yeah, they can hurt you if you touch them. That's exactly what the barnacles are. There's other environmental enemies like that. Well, not enemies, hazards. Traps and stuff like that throughout the game, but that's it. They're just traps. They're not enemies. These guys, the one major problem I have with this game is how the character control and the limits on the VR movement system actually make these guys way too overpowered. Unfortunately, they can't get the AI to move around too much because you're so limited in your movement. And as such, the only way that they can really put difficulty in the game is make like more heavy enemies. So as such, you kind of have to take about 5 or 6 headshots just to kill a basic soldier, you know, and they don't even come around that often. Every now and then, Alyx will say, "Shh, combine, combine." And she's kind of scared, and that's cool. But you're really rejoicing because you've been firing at head crabs for the past 2 hours, and you kind of wanted a combine fight. You're like, finally, I get to shoot a few combine. You shoot about 3 or 4 of them, waste about all of your ammo, and then that's it. You're back to shooting freaking head crabs for the next hour. It's really, really tedious, to be honest. Talking about ammo though, the ammo, they just don't give you much of it. Best way to describe this is shotgun ammo. They give you shotgun ammo 1 shell at a time, sometimes 2, and very rarely you'll get a little battery box kind of thing, which is really nice. But that gives you like 3 or 4. That's how little ammo the game gives you. You always feel like there's no option to do anything with the guns. Like, you have one way of killing enemies, maybe 2. One is explosives, one is just shooting them. It's like, can you imagine if Halo only had one type of pistol, one type of assault rifle, and one type of grenade? Yeah, this game has 2 types of grenades, but it ain't no Halo when it comes to grenades. Grenades in Halo, the 2 different types, or maybe even 3 in the newer ones, they have different mechanics to them. Each one has differences to them. Here you get 2 grenade types. They act exactly the same. They cause, as far as I can tell, the same damage, and they have almost the same timers. They just feel exactly the same. It's just that one kind of grows on a plant, and the other ones you find more of them, by the combine. It's so limited in what it can do. You get 3 weapons, and the only thing you can do because of the limited ammo is headshots. Headshots over headshots over headshots. And of course, it's all head crabs most of the time anyway, so it is all headshots. That's all you're doing in the game. It feels so boring. It's like, can you imagine? This is one game where what's very unusual about this game is that VR has made the combat weaker. In Half-Life 2, you had more fun gunplay than in the VR game. This is the first game where VR has made gunplay boring. How did they even manage that? Gunplay is the one thing that improves massively because of VR, because you can aim it properly, you can feel how the gun holds in hand, and you can play around with it, you can throw it into your other hand. That can't happen in this game. The game just actively stops you from doing anything it doesn't want you to do. I feel like the game is very self-aware. It knows exactly what it can do really, really well. Anything else though, if it can't do it perfectly well, it won't let you do it. It actively stops you from doing anything you want to do. And not to mention that the character controller is so heavily glitchy. Well, it's not necessarily glitchy, but if you've played through the game and not managed to fall through the world once, then I applaud you. Well done, because I've fallen through the world so many times on the last level, it's unbelievable. The game, just because it's so scared of motion sickness and so scared of doing anything more on the VR side, it won't let you do anything other than very, very static, very linear gameplay. And that's the reality here. VR made the game better, but unfortunately the game really doesn't need VR. It really isn't an impressive VR game other than its visuals. Visuals and story are beautiful, but honestly I could have just watched this game as a movie. I could watch through Jacksepticeye play or PewDiePie play and I'd have probably more fun than actually playing the game. Unfortunately, I can't give this game a good review on this side, a good rating on this side. In terms of as a VR game specifically, this game gets as low as a 5 out of 10. It really keeps up on the elements that it does really well because of its visual beauty and its extreme quality, but beyond that, it's just so weak and excessively linear. The game's constantly showing you how linear it is, and I don't like that. For me, I need more for VR. This is baby's first VR, which is great for new guys. If you're new to VR, play this game. It's worth it. If you ain't new to VR, this game is not worth it. It ain't worth it for me. I went back to Boneworks for a few hours, and I did not want to finish the game. I did not want to finish Half-Life. I just wanted to play Boneworks again, because it's the only place where I really feel open. I want to do certain things, and I can do more. This game just is the exact opposite. There's one way to do it, and that's all. The game gets a 5 out of 10 from me. I'm sorry, but it's unfortunate that I had to say that. I know that there's going to be people upset with this score that I gave the game and the things that I've mentioned, but please have a look at the game yourself. See what I've said and see how it feels in the game. I assure you, I can't give it better than that. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.